Okay, and we are live. Hi, everyone. So this is an AMA session, and for those of you who are on Zoom, you can always just raise your hands, put your question in the chat, and you can also join us here on video to ask your questions. So I have Ashabil with me, who is the content moderator, and she'll be reading out questions for those of you who couldn't make it to this call. And we do have a lot of other people who are enthusiastic, and they'll join us right here on video. So why don't you introduce yourself, Ashabil?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Arshabil. I work at MedBlocks, and I'll be your question moderator for today.
All right. With that, who wants to go with the first question? Should I get Keisha?
Okay. Hi.
All right. Hey, Keisha. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Keisha Barwise. I'm a consultant that's working with the Ministry of Health and Wellness in Jamaica. And I'm a doctor by training, but I've always had a passion for technology. And of course, that kind of led me to electronic health records. And then that further led me to understanding more about a data-first approach versus a software approach. And my work primarily right now is with National Electronic Health Records pilot and is around standardizing the collection of that data. I'm also working with or collaborating with other ministries across the Latin America and Caribbean who are doing similar digital transformation efforts.
And I mean, it's a very unique background, especially coming from being a doctor and then going into EHRs. But I suspect we'll have a lot of such people here today. Yeah, what's your question?
So the question was around countries, for argument's sake, or national implementations that have taken a FHIR-first approach or to their data. And if they were looking at something like openEHR, how would they incorporate that into their national strategy?
Excellent. So it's a really good question. So if you have a country that has already adopted at a national level a standard like FHIR, how do you make them also adopt something like openEHR, right? I think this, I want to show you this, this chart that I have. It's a really good representation of openEHR and FHIR. It's by Alan Alistair. Hopefully you guys can also see my screen. And yeah, this is the diagram that I'm talking about.
Right.
So this is a pretty good article. And, he goes over what and when FHIR should be used and so on. But this diagram is something that always catches my attention. So let me go to this diagram real quick. Yeah. So in openEHR, what you have is, so they categorize 3 zones, right? So from simple to complex and different specialties. So especially if you're just talking about a single hospital or a single organization, FHIR is fine. Like especially storing things in FHIR is fine, right? And as you get more and more progressively more complex, especially at a country region, storing things as FHIR is just not okay. You are gonna have a multitude of different profiles, and you're not just gonna be able to represent the data well, right? And this is for people who are adopting FHIR as a native storage mechanism. In case it's a transmission mechanism, which is what it is right now in most countries, the whole storage paradigm is still open for grabs, right? So a country could, for example, in the US or even in India, it's very similar, which is you have a transmission layer, which is usually FHIR, either through the FHIR REST API or through FHIR document exchange or through messaging. But they don't really comment a lot about what EHRs should use to store the data internally. So in that case, you can still use openEHR to store the data, and you can then use FHIR to transmit information. That's a completely valid way to do it. And I guess like for governments who have already adopted FHIR, they've mostly adopted it at the transmission side. So the whole clinical data repository and the storage of this data, it's still wide open for protocols like openEHR to be used.
So in that case, the electronic health record, if they already had one implemented, would almost operate as the front end for the data capture. And then you'd probably use or normalize that data and bring it into an openEHR store.
That's a really good way to, we are looking at multiple different EHRs that they've already adopted and it's already in place. You could kind of look at change data capture or some mechanism where you can tap into the database of these different EHRs and then bring it to an openEHR repository where you then have a unified care record. That makes sense?
It does. It does. I'm going to use the opportunity to springboard up to another question. So in the case where a country has gone ahead with that kind of software-based approach, and let's say they're still in the infancy of their digital transformation effort, and how do they then switch or pivot to a more data-centric approach? And what kind of human resources does that entail?
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic question with, there is a saying, no one gets fired for implementing Epic. I think it used to be no one gets fired for implementing Oracle, the database. And then the saying has gone on to like Epic. So the problem with this data first approach is that it's so new that people are just barely starting to understand that, oh, this is one way to really do digital health at a, at scale. So people are still realizing that, right? Like, so we are looking at different countries going with this set of adoptions. But if a government is still in its, they're not that pioneering and they're just like still thinking about, okay, I just need something to do and I need to implement a policy, then they will definitely not look at the data first approach as they won't look at that first, right? They'll look at what has other people done and they'll probably go and purchase Cerner or Epic or all of these EHRs, and then they'll try to make them talk to each other by pouring tons and tons of money into interoperability, right? So it's, I don't have an answer, to be honest. I really don't. I wish I did, but I don't.
I'm going to let somebody else go ahead and answer.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you. Thank you, Gisha. Great meeting you. All right. We have Anmol up next. Anmol, hi. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, hi there. I'm Amol Prakash. I am also a doctor by training and profession. I practiced as a GP in India for about 5 years. By the last year of my college, and as I was practicing in India, I was always a little bit of tech savvy, as Kesha said, but I thought I could see a lot of healthcare tech startups that was popping up in India, and one thing that a commonality that I could see them in them, that these were tech startups made up by started up by CS majors or engineering majors in a healthcare space. I couldn't see any doctors in their leadership booths, and I was like, doctors. Us as doctors spend about 10 to 15 years of our lives in this space, and we understand the pain points in these areas, and maybe we also have the solutions. We also know what solution could relieve those pain points, but we are not technically skilled to implement them.
Right.
So that thought ultimately landed me in a master's course. I'm currently doing my master's in health informatics at IU Indianapolis in United States. And Siddhartha, I want to thank you for this opportunity, man. I've been seeing your videos since your second video in YouTube. As doctors, we are often frowned upon or shunned when we are trying to move away from our traditional paths. And then they start putting blames on you. Or you're just afraid of going into the clinical pathway, that you like there is much more bigger impact that we as doctors could do once we get the technical skills. So that's why I'm here. And I think I should read out my question. I did make a copy of it, and I do apologize if my question does not make much sense. I am someone who's trying to learn about HL7 and FHIR, and so I was really hesitant in asking this. But what I understand is that given that smart on FHIR apps depend heavily on EHR systems, what are the risks if EHR vendors decide to restrict or close the access to their FHIR APIs? So as a smart on FHIR developer, how can I protect my app from such risks? If there is a chance of that these access points could be closed at any time, what is that motivates developers to build smart on FHIR apps? So I asked this doubt in my class also while I was going through an interoperability course. Like, what's my incentive? Like, the data is EHR data. It is protected. It's owned by Epic or Cerner, look, those big giants. So then what's my incentive, right? When I'm in their mercy. They could close the doors at any time. And these EHR data has a lot of regulations with HIPAA and all. So why should I make a smart on FHIR app then?
This is an excellent question, right? I actually think this goes deeper than you think, right? Because the reason why a lot of vendors today expose their data through Smart on FHIR is because of regulation. It's because of the 21st Century Cures Act, and it's because of the specific ONC guideline for G10. So that's the specific section which talks about EHI export through a standardized API, right? But that being said, I really like this. I want to show this article by Fast and Health. It's called How to Ignore Information Blocking Legislation Like a Pro. So this is a very sarcastic article, and I really liked it the first time I read it. It's by Jason, who's the founder of Fast and Health, and they do a lot of stuff related. So here they talk about, okay, the Cure's final act is upon all EHRs, and they need to really catch up with that and implement the Smart on FHIR API. But what are the different things that they can do to actually not do that? How can they block information? And it's a hilarious read. So you can just document things really poorly. You can completely lack the support and contact page, right? And this guy, he's actually made a GitHub repo with a list of all the EHRs that don't follow this properly. And there is no sandbox or missing sandbox credentials, delay, patient pre-registration. And these are all the technical parts. It's really valid what you have right now, the question that you have, which is sometimes they implement this thing where some EHR called Advanced MD has Office ID as a requirement, but they do not tell you what this Office ID is. So you can't really log in and do anything that you want. Now, the answer to your question is like, what can you really do to protect your Smart on FHIR application, and what can EHRs, like how can they not block your access? It's through regulation, right? Like it's through proper regulation and implementation of the regulation that they will want to expose this data. Because there is a very real conflict of interest here. The EHRs don't want you to build a nicer app than what they already can offer, right? Like Epic or Cerner would rather build their own modules, and they will implement every single feature for every single department themselves than allow a Smart on FHIR app to be better than them, right? So there is a real, it's a misalignment of incentives. The EHRs don't want the data exposed, whereas at the same time, regulation is pushing them to expose it. So to answer your question, one is proper regulation and proper implementation of these regulations. So although a lot of EHRs today claim that they are Smart on FHIR compliant, they use all sorts of techniques and tactics to kind of not be compliant with what is really needed. And even if we look at Epic and Cerner today, and like the incompatibility between these two EHRs, they don't really function the way that they're actually supposed to, according to FHIR and Smart on FHIR. So it's only, we need to make more people aware that, okay, this is a real regulation that EHR vendors need to go through and implement. And secondly, if they are blocking information, you can put them, you can report them to this particular address here. So I will share this this article in the description of the video after this is done. But it's a real problem, and the only way that we can actually get people to open up their data silos is by pushing them through regulation.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. That makes so much sense. Thank you so much. Can I ask a quick follow-up? I know we are on a strict time schedule, and I don't want to eat up on other people's time. This is all because the EHR data is the data that is collected by these healthcare entities, which is covered by HIPAA laws. What if we could collect some form, a portion of the healthcare data our own self, and the patient are inputting it, or the users are inputting it by themselves? Like, for example, the apps used by menstruating women to cover their cycles, right?
Right.
So I had this crazy idea which I shared with some of my colleagues who imagine you can add a functionality that is added to a dating app like Grindr, Tinder, or Bumble or something, where it shows in some way or form, like a tick, a heart, or a asterisk, that this person has cleared all the STD checks.
Right.
And this data is inputted by patients or the consumers themselves.
Right.
So as a young adult who is single, that's our ideal consumer, and he wants to hook up, right? Basic need, human need. There's a solution in the market for it, but at the same time, I don't want to get any STDs.
Right.
Now I cannot get that information because it is protected.
Right. Right. No, funnily enough, there is another startup that I know who is exactly working on something like this to validate this thing, and but it's a complex topic, especially self-reported data. And again, I think Keisha also asks about this, which is how do you validate that exact data point? Like, how do you know if it's correct what they're reporting, right? If it's self-reported by the patient, you have problems. You need to then validate it, then like, okay, blockchain and like signing and so on. Interesting idea, but there are people working on this, and it's interesting that you brought it up. HIPAA laws are not too friendly to this, and I don't think GDPR is either.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Amol. All right. So we'll read a few questions from the people who've submitted this, and I think I have one from YouTube. Considering how messy real-world FHIR data are, how could LLMs be implemented as a normalization for storing and querying data uniformly? Would you recommend this versus a data standard policy? So LLMs still need a target, right? Like, so you can't have an LLM read FHIR data without knowing what you want to convert this into. And I do have a video on this specifically talking about what the future of data standards is going to be. And I think we really need to agree on data models and how the data is really going to be represented even after LLMs capture it, right? Because the problem right now is you can't query on unstructured data with the same reliable accuracy that you can query on structured data. So people are doing all sorts of things to convert unstructured data to structured data first, and then querying on that. So I still think you need data standard policy, and you need data standards with models, like with data models. And yeah, that's the answer to my question. Okay, any other questions? Ashabil, do you want to put something in there? Yep.
I have a question here from Bhavani.
Okay.
She says that I see that you are a medical doctor and working in FHIR. Are you using your clinical domain knowledge in your day-to-day FHIR work? I'm a pharmacist in USA. I'm interested if there is such requirement. This question might be irrelevant, but I appreciate your answer.
It's a really good question. So Bhavani, we have a lot of people today join us who are actually doctors, and it's unbelievable how useful the clinical skills are, especially when thinking about the domain and reasoning about the domain. Because in the end, it's not about your technical skills and how much you understand about like these standards anymore. Because LLMs and generative AI can do this pretty easily. It's about understanding real people and their problems. And for me, like having that background in healthcare, and I have both my parents are also doctors, so like I've kind of like grown up in a hospital environment. So having that deep insight definitely helps. It helps me understand people more, and so provide them with better solutions. So I encourage you to, like your domain knowledge as a pharmacist will definitely come in handy, even if you decide to go into the tech path. All right, I think I have Julian here. I will, Julian, is it okay if I can add you to the broadcast? I see you on Zoom as well. Here you
Yeah,
go.
sure, go ahead.
Hey, Julian. Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can introduce yourself and read out your question.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, originally I had a question about the best way to store data when you were pulling it from multiple different FHIR sources, but I think we touched on that one briefly. I was fascinated by the previous comment that mentioned about having the individual people or patients put data into an app that eventually goes on to the medical record. I think there's a turning point happening now with FHIR where we might hopefully in the next couple of years be able to see an added dimension of individuals or patients putting feedback from certain procedures, treatments, pharmaceuticals, based on their own experience. And of course, the difficulty till now is that we haven't really been able to, have a website where people can say, here's my rating of this procedure, or here's my rating of this pharmaceutical drug that I tried, because we have no way to verify that they actually, had that procedure or they had that. So yeah, I'm excited to see if there's anything out there where now that we can have these apps that know that this person got this medication or got this treatment, that we can then start to have some kind of additional feedback from the person around, hey, I had this knee replacement and, I'm having these side effects and I would rate it, on a 1 to 10, as a 4 or, as a 9. Because that aspect of the patient's feedback, I think, is important. And I think FHIR and these new apps will be able to start to incorporate that, albeit with some kind of verification and validation.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think it's definitely becoming the case that the patient is contributing back to the care record. And it's not just the practitioner understanding and interpreting what the patient has, but the patient is in a very real way able to contribute back to his own EHR, right? So it will definitely change things.
Yeah. Maybe one day there'll be a FHIR element that will be able to incorporate that patient feedback or patient rating, or personal report of condition and so forth.
Yeah. Hoping to that day. Yeah. Thank you, Julian. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying your course, by the way, the FHIR Bootcamp. So big shout out to everyone to look at that if that's something that you're interested in looking at development around FHIR. It's been great. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for the plug. Thank you. All right. If any other questions, yep.
We also received a question from Callum. I think he's in the
Callum. Oh,
Zoom
yeah.
meeting.
All right. I'm gonna add Callum to the stream. Hey, Callum.
Hello again. Yeah, you're going to get another plug because I'm a previous participant of the FHIR Bootcamp, and it was fantastic. So yeah, I'd recommend it to everyone. But yeah, my question is more related to openEHR. So in terms of the recent announcement that HL7 and openEHR are going to be working more closely together. There's a real challenge in mapping openEHR to your FHIR APIs, and I wondered if you had any any tips on how to go about doing that?
Got it. So this is a very active area of exploration. And in fact, we are working with the German government specifically on one of this project. And let me share with you, there is one called openEHR. So this is by another one of my friend. So this project aims to integrate HL7 FHIR with openEHR with the mapping language. It's a dynamic, sort of a mapping language. So there is a quick demo here. So the idea here is we are able to map these two different domains by having these declarative mapping files. And we are able to then put these mapping files both on the FHIR spec as well as the openEHR spec, right? So for example, if you take a look at a FHIR resource today, for example, FHIR patient resource, they have mappings to various other languages, right? Like they have it with HL7v2. They talk about, if it's an identifier in FHIR, then that maps to the HL7 PID3. And if it's a birth date, that's PID7. And they have all of these different mappings here. So our idea is that eventually we'll come to a consensus on how we can represent this information, and we'll have a declarative mapping for a resource to an openEHR archetype. And again, on the archetype side, you have the clinical knowledge manager, and you are able to pick out an archetype, and then you're able to tell exactly how this particular thing maps to a FHIR resource. And just like we have header attribution data protocol, the plan is that eventually there will be a mapping component here, ideally a FHIR mapping component. And this is still like very new, but then I think both the communities are at least aligned on this one very specific aspect, which is it should be easy for systems implementing both FHIR and openEHR to be able to translate and transition between these two seamlessly.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll have a look into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Callum. Okay. Have Rahul Ranjan here. Is he on the chat? Do we want to add him in?
I don't think he's on Zoom.
All right. He's on YouTube. Is it permissible and technically feasible to store patient data fetched from a FHIR server into our own server or database? If yes, what are the best practices and regulatory considerations? Okay. It's absolutely technically feasible to fetch data from a FHIR server and store it in your own server. A lot of the times people go with another FHIR server to store all this data, but then it's usually not required. It really depends on your use case. If all you need is like a cache or a store of this FHIR information, Postgres with JSONB is absolutely fine. Like the expressivity of queries on JSONB in Postgres is actually better than FHIR own search queries, right? So that's there. Best practices for regulatory considerations. This is again HIPAA. And if you're going to sign a business associate agreement with the hospital anyway, you already anyway have to keep this data secure, right? It's a different aspect if you are not signing this, and if this is PHI, so you definitely want to sign as a business associate if it's a HIPAA covered entity. So that's from Rahul. Ashabal, anything else from the...
Arun Kumar is raising his hand.
Arun Kumar, okay. Hey Arun, I am gonna
Hi
add
Siddharth,
you
I don't know
to the
what's
stream.
happened to my camera. Right.
Okay. I can't add you into the stream. Okay, I think we can hear you. That's okay. Can we... Yep. Go ahead. What's your question?
Okay, so my name is Arun Kumar. I have close to 20 plus years of experience in healthcare IT. Healthcare chose me. I never chose healthcare, and I've never been able to get out of healthcare. So the question is, I have a couple of questions. First one is, has COVID had any impact in terms of data interoperability?
Right. I honestly don't know. Because I've been around during the COVID period. I think, we've been increasing in terms of the amount of data that we can share and so on. We've definitely been, it's been an upward trend. But has COVID really had an impact? I'm not sure, because it could be COVID, but it could also just be time. Like it could just be people understanding the need for interoperability and implementing it. But I think when COVID happened and then people were locked down and they wanted to go for televisits and so on, it did accelerate things a little bit. But then I think it was really short-lived. So they didn't think about sustainable solutions for like after COVID. So I still think the general trend is upwards, but COVID probably not. I still think it's probably just the general trend in itself and not COVID in particular.
Okay, my second question is, I come from HL7V2, CDA, and then eventually FHIR, right? Uh, is it difficult for me to learn openAIR? And I'm not a clinician. I'm
Right.
neither an engineer. I just have enough experience in, let's say, healthcare IT.
Right. I think openAIR is not that hard once you understand like what it is really about. It's just like clinicians really find it intuitive and easier to get started because they look at openAIR and they're like their domain right there. Like they can understand that that's the language in which like they can understand a clinical model, for example, much easier than a technical person. Whereas FHIR is around like it's focused on the technical implementer. So they look at a JSON or they look at an XML and they're like immediately, oh, I understand that. So openAIR, although on the technical side, it's a little bit more challenging than FHIR. I think once you understand some of the moving components, it becomes easier. And I'm also seeing implementations of openAIR become more and more developer friendly. So they are working on the spec to make it a bit more developer friendly as well. So I think both of the sides combined, it is absolutely possible for someone like you to understand and even master openAIR.
So my last question is, as an healthcare architect, why should I learn openAIR?
Right. It's just one of the tools we have at our disposal. I just look at everything as a tool that we have at our disposal. And at the end of the day, if it helps solve a particular problem better than the alternative, then I mean, it makes sense to keep it in your arsenal.
Thanks, Siddharth. I've been following you from your very first video, and I echo that attending your FHIR bootcamp is immensely satisfying, irrespective of how many years you may have spent in the interop world. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you, Arun. By the way, for the people watching this on the live stream, this is not a paid advertising program. I didn't ask any of these people to talk about the openAIR bootcamp or the FHIR bootcamp. Sorry. Yes. So we have Sindhuja K. Sindhuja, do you want to show up on the stream? Let me see. Sindhuja, yep, I do see you on the stream. Yep. Do you want to ask your question yourself? Oh, okay, I'll just read it out. That's fine. Hi, can you talk about ABDM and NHCX FHIR profile? A startup getting into building ABDM connectors, what would be your suggestions? And the team expertise required to build a ABDM connector. Okay. So, Sindhuja, the ABDM and the NHCX FHIR profiles, they talk very little about the FHIR itself, like the FHIR data models, because ABDM, again, it's based around the document exchange paradigm of FHIR. And what you will actually be dealing with is mostly the government APIs and the V1, V2, and V3 APIs that are being pushed by the government. Very similar with NHCX. It's a messaging paradigm, and you'll be dealing more with the APIs of the NHCX specific implementation rather than FHIR. So if you have a team who knows how to read like documentation of a few REST APIs, and they just need to have a basic knowledge of how they can read the FHIR specification. I have a bunch of videos on that. They'll be okay. They'll be just fine. This is not like a FHIR implementation. It's mostly an implementation that happens to use FHIR. It's pretty okay for any developer to get started with this.
We also did receive a question from, I hope I'm not butchering this name, Zynek.
Zybnik. Yeah, I think I have Zybnik here on the, right here. Yeah. Hey, Zybnik.
Hi guys.
How are you doing?
Good, good. It's very good to see you again, Siddharth. And I'll be another not paid advertisement for the Siddharth Bootcamp because it was really, really great course, and I learned a lot. And I recommend it to everybody who is interested in learning more about FHIR. I had initially a different question because the topic you guys were talking about with Amol struck up a new question for me and follow up. I was understanding this space for the electronic medical health records companies as a platform. And I was surprised that you said that they don't want to share their data and want to develop the features themselves. I would understand that they would, in the contrary, support the third-party developers to develop the features for them. And that's why having larger palette of features they are offering to the hospital without actually needing to develop themselves. Is that really so that they don't want third-party apps to be connected to their applications?
So this is a matter of who gets the money, right? So as soon as you have third-party apps that they then also need to share the revenue that they're able to get from a particular hospital. And the hospital, like, let's say, has a allocated budget for all of their EHR implementation. Then they now need to look at getting something first, buying like a full-fledged EHR or EMR first, and then also going and procuring these different third-party apps. So when you have limited budget and people are competing for that same exact limited resources, what tends to usually happen is that you have one monopoly, the person who controls it starts doing everything, right? It's the same thing with Amazon, actually. To be honest, Amazon has thousands of products, like probably a million products, I don't know. But they have Amazon Basics, and they start building things that are extremely well sold, and they market it to their customer base, right? So they may look at, for example, a chair that is selling really well, and they'll come up with a version of a chair that Amazon can sell themselves because they're able to retain more of the profits that way. So it's a similar kind of a pattern we are seeing with EHRs and third-party app developers, which, I don't know, maybe as time goes by, they'll come to the realization that one person just can't do everything well. And so the EHRs will start slowly cutting down more and more on the feature set. But today, as it stands now, the hospital is anyway going to look for these feature sets. So they'll implement whatever they want to, impress them.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Zaibnik.
We also have received a question from Shantanu. One second.
I mean, you can read it out, that's fine. I'll also try to display it. Yep.
Would love to get your take on the best option to build offer consumer healthcare data platform challenges and opportunities.
Right. So Shantan, good question. There are few options that you have today, right? So this is again the whole buy versus build question, right? So if you have an EHR that already serves your needs really well, and it again depends on the scale at which you are going to operate. So if it's just one single clinic and if it's a consumer healthcare data platform, again, who's the consumer, right? Is it going to be, I'm assuming it's going to be doctors, right, who are going to use this platform. If it models their particular specialty really well, I would probably go with that first, right? Because you have everything that you need and you can at least start off with that. But then if you go beyond a certain scale and you have these different use cases and these different needs, then I would seriously consider a data platform. And again, when choosing a data platform, you have a lot of options today. There are FHIR-based data platforms. There are openEHR-based data platforms. And again, at the scale of what you're doing, you can choose a FHIR platform if you're going to do it at a very small scale. It's just going to be your hospital, and you're not going to have many other people, and you're not going to exchange this information like across multiple specialties or organization. Then FHIR is like, okay, you can use something like MedPlum or Health Samurai to do one of these. As soon as you get beyond that scale, I would suggest something like openEHR, right? Like something which is built for this level of complexity. So it's a really good question. Definitely challenges and opportunities. There are for both, but I would say openEHR is starting to gain a lot more momentum. So right now it's kind of that hockey stick curve for openEHR, and FHIR has already passed that hockey stick. So it's mostly like it's a lot more mature. So you get a lot more mature solutions. It's a really good question. I think we have Praveen Kumar.
If I may ask a follow-up question, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of EHR data, is there like a marketplace for EHR data that you see?
So marketplace for EHR data. So you mean where they can buy and sell data itself or applications?
Yes. No, the first one.
Buy and sell data itself. I think there are a bunch of blockchain companies that are kind of doing this. Like Medical Chain is one of them. That's like having a data mart for healthcare data. There are also research companies that do this. Like they sell their data formats in OMOP. So you can take a look at that. But these are usually de-identified, completely anonymized data sets. For real data, I don't know of anyone.
Thanks.
All right. So we have Praveen Kumar. Do you want to ask this question yourself, Praveen? Are you still in the? I think I can see you here.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can see you too.
Yeah. So we have got a rather enriched partnership status with AWS, and I mean it's impending on us to actually utilize most of the services where we can actually. So recently we came across AWS HealthLake and imaging and autonomic service. And I don't need to explain what these guys do. HealthLake actually allows you to set up analytical, storage as well as FHIR storage quite beautifully, and allows you all the bells and whistles that come along with the typical data platform kind of stuff. Health imaging allows you to actually simply store the DICOM and extraction the metadata, and then you can do a number of things with it. And autonomics, I haven't gone detailed, but it seems to actually take care of the genomic data. I'm sure that since a guy like you always seems to live on a bleeding edge, you might have some take on it and actually can actually enlighten us. Thank you. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of yours. I've been following you from God knows. So I'm really considering myself really lucky to ask this question. Thank you.
Thank you. Really good question. So HealthLake, I actually want to show you. I don't know how much progress they've made since the last time I checked on HealthLake. We were trying to use this for a customer. HealthLake API limits. So yeah, so what they're doing right now is, so first of all, HealthLake is only available in the US and India. It's not that widely implemented across all of the AWS regions. And secondly, their APIs are quite limited. So as we talk about today, they don't support as much of the APIs that the typical competitors do. So for example, their bulk API endpoint is still a little primitive. Their search capability and search queries are still, they're still, I wouldn't consider it a fully fledged FHIR server just yet. They're still, they're still cooking and they're still like baking, but I think they'll get there soon. But as of the last time that I checked on it, not really. So for example, number of resources per bundle, they only support 160, right? So number of bundle requests per account, you can only make like 20 bundle requests per second. And just our application, which was like a kind of an EHR that was calling this, 20 per second is nothing, right? Like you have multiple people opening up your apps, and it's just 20 per second is not enough. and they still haven't increased these quotas for the regular population. So usually people don't immediately know about this when they're getting started with HealthLake. See, although we are AWS partners and we do help people get onboarded with HealthLake and so on, we do see that there are a few issues right now. It's good in certain ways. If you're already in the AWS ecosystem and you just want a compliant FHIR server, then you can consider HealthLake. But if you're going to do like a lot of queries on it, or if you're going to use it extensively, then I would usually stay away from it, because their analytics solution that they have today also involves a bunch of batch processing and some jobs. So it's not exactly always up to sync with the HealthLake instance. So it's a little delayed, so like 1 to 2 seconds delayed. If that's okay, then you can use AWS Athena to actually do the queries, and you can do the queries in SQL.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do the queries in HealthLake directly. But as a FHIR server and as a FHIR server with the APIs, unfortunately, as it stands right now, and again, the date is 22nd August 2024. This might have changed in the future for those who are watching it later. But today, I think the most performant FHIR server on the cloud is probably Google FHIR, and Azure FHIR is probably the most feature complete with Smart on FHIR and so on. AWS is still getting there. It doesn't offer Smart on FHIR, or is not the most performant either. So it's kind of like I wouldn't immediately recommend it for people who are just
Wow.
looking for a FHIR solution.
Thank you so very much. Solved the problem.
All right. Knowing what you know, how would you design your clinician data interoperability journey for maximizing the understanding of converging standards and emerging technologies? I'm trying to figure this out myself. I really don't know, because there are just so many standards out there and these things keep evolving. But I would at least like start with the basics, right? The effectiveness of books still amaze me, right? Like if you take a really good book on just healthcare interoperability, it covers almost everything that you need. And there is one really good one by Graham Grieve. There is another good one by, I'll put it in the resources down below, but there are a lot of really good books out there. So I would start with the books and then look at the actual standards that they're referencing. And then I would try to dive deeper into it and then read it on the internet and understand a bit more and go through like maybe videos on YouTube, then maybe take some courses to really go into it. But yeah, I would say the top ones at least are SNOMED CT is a must. Regardless of whether or not you know anything else, SNOMED CT is a must. LOINC is right up there, but not as important as SNOMED CT. ICD-10 is really not a classification. It's like you can understand it immediately. FHIR and openEHR are probably the most important data standards. Then you have OMOP, which is a good export format for research and analytics. On top of that, there are a bunch of other ones, but they're not as widely used. Like HL7v2 is still very widely used, but I usually don't recommend people like immediately go and dive deep into it, because I think it doesn't have that much of a future as the other more modern standards. So that's my answer. Okay, Ashabel, anyone else from the...
Yeah. We have a message from Dr. Hardik.
Yep.
He says, what are your thoughts on creating India-specific EHR system? Also, should India be focusing on creating specially primary care EHR system? And your thoughts and challenges involved in this?
This is Dr. Hardik.
Yeah.
All right. So, Doctor, I would answer this with in India, it's a race to the bottom in terms of what people adopt in terms of an EHR, right? So especially a primary care focused EHR system, there are a lot of good ones out there. So for example, if you take Eka Care, they offer their system at 500 rupees, which is like how many dollars? Probably $10 per year per practitioner, right? You can't beat these people because their whole model of operation is they first implement the EHR systems, then they try to get the patients, and they try to do this whole Uber sort of a business model where they are able to book patients through their apps. So would I want to build a primary care EHR system and sell it to the Indian market? Probably no. I would not do it if I'm being totally honest. But is there a need for such a system? Absolutely, yes. We do need people to do this because right now it's mostly pen and paper, and you can't move to value-based healthcare without having a proper EHR in place and without having the data in place. So that's my thought on creating an India-specific EHR system. You can still go after this more niche specialties. That's a little bit more lucrative because they tend to bring in more money. Primary care and EHR systems are usually not a good combo for if you're building a business on top of it. Purely talking about it from a business angle, from a social angle, and from everything else. Absolutely, there is a need, and go after it. Okay, I have Sonia Paul here. Can you please explain ABI as an archetype? I did not find ABI under openEHR, and I might be wrong. If you can explain it, thanks. What exactly is ABI again?
ABI is ankle brachial index. That is
Oh,
the ratio between the upper limb and the lower limb blood pressure.
got it. Okay, got it. So you're talking about, okay, so it's a ratio between the upper limb and the lower limb.
Lower limb blood pressure.
Got it. Maybe they may not have defined it yet in the CKM. The clinical knowledge manager is, again, it's a community contributed effort, and not all of the clinical data points are out there. So if maybe you could do a little bit more of searching. I don't know if this is an archetype yet, but if there is one called body measurement, it's just a generic body measurement for anything. And this happens to be a ratio between two body measurements. But again, if it is significant and if it's clinically important, then you can always contribute back an archetype to the international CKM. That may be something that we can do in this case if it's really not available in the CKM.
And do you have ABPM as well under CKM?
What's ABPM again?
ABPM is like monitoring the blood pressure throughout 24 hours.
Oh, right. Yeah, that should be available. I think in all of the archetypes, you usually have a 24-hour as well as, so for example, if you take blood pressure V2 and you go in here, the event that is there, so there is always, you choose after saying the systolic and diastolic, whether it's an any event which can be captured anytime or it's a 24-hour average, in which case it's a mean of what's captured in 24 hours. So there's a way to represent that. I'm pretty sure this ratio is probably there. I just don't know what it's maybe called. Maybe it's not the waist to hip ratio. It's one of these ratios, but yeah, maybe it's not immediately available on the CKM, and you may need to do some searching.
Thank you so much. And is this session is going to carry forward tomorrow as well? Because I got an email that it is going to happen tomorrow.
Oh, no, it's today. I think you might have received the email that it's tomorrow today. Sorry, that may have been a delay in the email. Yeah, apologies. I think if I wasn't sharing my screen and this is the blood pressure archetype and here's the 24-hour average that you are asking for.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I think we are close to time, but we do have a lot more questions, I believe. Asha, what else?
Yeah, well, we have a question from Mitesh. He asks basic difference between procedure and service request FHIR resource, as well how it connects with observations and diagnostic reports FHIR resources.
Okay, so a lot of this is actually captured in the workflow part of FHIR, especially. So if you take a look at service request, take a look at FHIR service request. I think I'll also talk about how you can read this specification yourself so that you can kind of arrive at this same thing that I know, but faster, right? So service request is one of those resources under the workflow implementation of FHIR. So if you actually go to the workflow implementation, you'll see the workflow module, and there is this really good diagram. Okay, I can't, workflow section on patterns. So workflow management pattern. So there is this whole task, and then you're able to create another resource with a task. But in case of a service request, what happens is that, so let's look at this service request from Placer. I saw a really good explanation of this by a FHIRly instructor. I think I'll link to that in the description down below. But basically, if you have a service request, what that means is something needs to be done, right? So you're telling someone that this particular procedure needs to be done, or this particular measurement needs to be captured. So it can be anything. You can have a service request for basically anything. You just need to do something. Now, a procedure is when that something actually happens. So I could have a service request saying that I want to post this patient for cataract surgery tomorrow. But then I could actually have that cataract surgery happen tomorrow, and only then the procedure resource would show up in the CDR. And the procedure resource can reference the service request so that it completes this whole loop. So there is a really good diagram. I'm not able to find it, but it's the whole life cycle of the event is what I'm talking about. Communication patterns. Here we go. So this is this whole workflow state machine thing going on. So like a service request can be requested, received, accepted, and so on. And they're talking about the task, but it's very similar for a service request. So they talk about a few examples with the lab order set. So take a look at this whole workflow module, and it will probably answer a lot more questions that you have. Okay. Anything else?
Maybe we can take a last question.
Yeah, and anyone else here on the Zoom, you can also just like raise your hands if you want to ask a question before we part. We'll take this question now.
This is from Varhan Johannes. He asks applicability for apps of interoperability between FHIR and openEHR for usage with Epic, for example, for payments of hospital bills by health insurers.
So applicability of apps of interoperability between FHIR and openEHR. Okay, so right now these are two different protocols, right? So right now you have you have openEHR as a separate set of APIs and FHIR as a separate set of APIs. They're not really interoperable in that sense, not just yet. And then FHIR for payments on hospital bills and health insurers, there are a bunch of different implementation guides. So these are not really done through apps, but they're done through, for example, DaVinci is a very popular implementation guide in the US, which talks about payer-to-payer interaction or payer-to-provider interactions. So you may want to look into those, especially for payment of hospital bills and health insurances. I think there was another question by someone else that I remember as well, talking about what is the status of FHIR for payers and for financial modules. I would suggest the same thing. So there is this whole FHIR DaVinci profile. You can take a look at this. This is the usual payer-to-payer and payer-to-provider and payer-to-patient as well, but that's also covered by the 21st Century Cures Act. Now, this whole implementation guide goes into this in depth. It covers things like pre-authorization, actually sending in the claims and the explanation of benefit and all of that. So you may want to take a look at this as well. Right. Follow up for Mitesh. Okay. Yes. So service request till the time procedure is not complete, Epic would not allow it to be fetched. So till the time the procedure, ideally, the procedure resource will only be created once this procedure is like kind of done, or they can still have it as planned. But as soon as that gets created in their domain model, you would have that available through the FHIR API. Okay, so service request, you'll still be able to get it at any time. So ideally, but procedure, you usually get it only after it's done. All right, final question. Catchy Chas. Okay. How well do LLMs understand openEHR and FHIR? Are there agents that can build CDS tools from a prompt? They understand them pretty well, to be honest. They are actually really good these days. And, if you simplify the data structures even further and you're able to provide it with a really good prompt and have like an agentic workflows, I think this is the future of clinical decision support. I think they're getting really good. All right. Anyone else from the Zoom chat who wants to join us? Ask maybe one final question before we part. Packed today with a lot of questions. All right. All right. So thanks a lot. And oh yeah, this is Vipin. Okay. Please do register for the upcoming FHIR webinar that we are going to have. We have a link here. So if you are interested in learning some more about FHIR, you can register there. So again, thanks a lot for those of you who took the time to join and ask questions. Yeah, so best of luck. One final question. What advice would you give to a developer heading into the clinical development aspect, considering all the rapid development and challenges that happen in healthcare? So, Jonathan, I actually think there are only a few basic things to understand in terms of the domain. There are different, evolutions in the clinical space, and they keep changing. But once you understand the basic domain, you are good to go. Like, just understand what happens exactly when a patient comes in, how exactly does data flow through the system, how does someone finally get paid, and how does someone follow up. So these things, you must have these questions in your head anyway. So just try to understand the domain in as much depth as possible. Try to understand the specific nuances, and you'll be good to go. So, all right. So thank you everyone for joining us. And if you want to stay in touch, you can join our Slack. We will put a link to the Slack also in the description down below. Take a look at that. Thanks a lot for joining this AMA. This was the first of its kind, and soon we'll maybe have this as a regular thing. Okay. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.